And good evening and hello to all of creation. It is a delight to have you with us this evening. You are listening to WAPN 91.5 FM radio. My name is Randy. This is the Loving Kindness Music Radio Show. And we have a special treat for everybody this evening. But again, my name is Randy. This is 91.5 FM radio. Loving Kindness Music Radio Show is the name of this game here. And I'm one half of the worship music duo known as Loving Kindness. The other half, the better half, is my beautiful wife, who is running the cameras this evening. Is her beautiful hand. Thank you, Monique. And when we sing our love songs for Jesus, we call it Loving Kindness, because truly it's His loving kindness that has enabled and allowed us to even sing again. And we're so thrilled and blessed to be doing that again. And speaking of that, very happy to announce that not this Friday, but next Friday, Loving Kindness will be releasing our newest single titled We Stand Redeemed. We're going to give you a sneak preview of that in just a moment, but I want to let you know that we have several albums, and this will be our fourth single that we've put out in the past 6 months. So thank you to Trinity Publishing and Jeff and Monica. Bless you guys. We love y'all, and we are going to raise the praise for Jesus with the music. And so we're thrilled to be able to have all that music available for everybody. And what I wanted to tell you, it's available on all of the major streaming platforms. So you can find it anywhere you usually find your music, on Spotify or Amazon or Apple. We also have a Facebook page, a YouTube channel, and a Rumble channel. So if you haven't seen those, we're asking you to check them out and subscribe to the channel and pick a video and play that puppy and share it with somebody if you like what you hear, and hit and smite thine like button. Yeah, we like to say that. So, but anyway, we are so blessed to be able to have the music available. We also have everything on our website. That's lovingkindnessmusic.com. lovingkindnessmusic.com. So I think that covers it. All of the major streaming platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and the website as well. And what we're going to do is April 14th is the official release date for the new single. And generally it takes about a week or so for it to get loaded up into the various platforms. So it should be available soon after that. But the song is called We Stand Redeemed. We recorded it over at Sound Mind Studio with our producer, Pastor Matt McEwen. What a blessing it is to have Matt on our musical team. Because basically Monique and I write the songs, and we go play our guitar and we sing, and Matt is the band and helps us embellish, and he really brings it to life. And we are so grateful and we are thankful. Thank you, Matan. We love you. And what I want to do is I want to play this real quick for everybody. This song is going to be coming out Friday, April 14th. It is the newest Loving Kindness single. It is called We Stand Redeemed in Yeshua Messiah. The title is We Stand Redeemed. It goes like this. Calvary was victory, not the tragedy it seems. Calvary was victory, now we stand redeemed, we stand redeemed. Yeshua, Messiah. was victory, and now we stand redeemed. We stand and we stand redeemed in Yeshua Messiah. That is truth. And we praise you, Jesus. And Yeshua is simply the Hebrew version of the name Jesus. And not too long ago, while saying my prayers, and Father, what do you want? When we write our songs, he told me, sing to my lost sheep in Israel, and they know the name Yeshua. And so that's when we started putting that name in. It's like 3 or 4 different songs that we have Yeshua in now. So praise you, Jesus. Praise you, Yeshua, Messiah, Jesus, the Christ. And we do praise you. He is our God. He is our Savior. He's our Lord. He's our King of Kings and our Lord of Lords. And we are celebrating the Easter weekend with a very, very special treat. I want to let everybody know that we're going to be taking you guys into a little excursion into the Jesus Revolution with our very, very special friend of the show, Ed Weyman. We met Ed probably 7 to 8 years ago.
There he is.
When we were doing he was holding a Bible study in his home in our neighborhood, and we found out about it in the course of meeting people in the neighborhood, and we ended up showing up there one night. It was every Thursday, and what a blessed thing that it was every week. There would be 30 to 40 people showing up every week for the Bible study, and Ed, bless him, you know, he found out we played guitars, and he asked us to play a few songs before each Bible study, and it was such a blessing to be able to do that, Ed. And you know, Ed, you were actually one of the very first voices. In fact, one of the very first. We did Pastor Charlie West, kind of a prophet, way back in the way back. But Ed was the first one that told us straight up, you guys should be singing for Jesus. You remind me of some of the people that I used to listen to back in the Jesus Revolution. And I remember you using that term, and I didn't know what you were talking about. The Jesus Revolution, what's that? That was something that happened back in the 70s. And, you know, and we had the Bible study for 3 or 4 years, I guess, and it was a wonderful event until, you know, events happen and you move different places. Okay, so we met Ed again at one of our recent performances and hooked back up with him again, and lo and behold, we're doing exactly what he had suggested years ago. Because Trinity Publishing, Jeff, who attended our church with us, he was the one that heard us in church, and it was his idea to put us into the studio and to get this started. So, but you were telling us this 3 or 4 years before we ever even ran into Jeff. But the Holy Spirit lined things up to where we needed the encouragement of you, and then we needed the encouragement and the intervention of Jeff and Monica at the time that it happened, and they're our strongest supporters. And we're a team. We're a team. God has knitted our hearts together.
Yes.
But what we want to do is, Mr. Ed Weyman has personally spent time and participated and served in the Jesus Revolution back in the 70s, back in LA, and he told us so much about it, and lo and behold, here's this blockbuster movie that pops up, and it's all the people that he knows, and so he has been kind enough to agree to come on to the show and just kind of reminisce about some of his experiences back with the Jesus Revolution and some of the characters that I think that the movie brings to life for us. But Ed, thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to the Loving Kindness Music Radio Show. It's a blessing to have you here. I understand, I'm going to kind of lead you off. I understand that this journey kind of started at Woodstock, of all places. Your journey to Jesus kind of started at Woodstock. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience? And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ed Weyman, welcome to the show, Ed.
Thanks, Randy. It's really nice and honor to be here with Randy and Monique. We have quite a bit of history together now. We've had a lot of wild times.
A blessed history.
Yes. And it's just, I'm fortunate that they came out with this movie, because everyone thought I made all these stories up.
Well, no, we didn't think you made them up.
Who's this Lonnie Frisbee guy in this Calvary Chapel, and 1,500 kids showing up in a parking lot for a Wednesday night Bible study.
And hippies for Jesus. What is this?
And dunking people in an ice-cold ocean for baptism. And going to the beach with Lonnie, and they'd give us these little tracts to hand out, and we'd give them out to people, and all of a sudden Lonnie would start to preach. And we're like, what is going on here? So we would get in the crowd, and the people would be mesmerized. Lonnie was like hypnotic. You know, he had a gift. I mean, he was like my age. In fact, he turned 21 before I did. I remember he flunked that.
And how old were you at this time?
I turned 21 in December, and Lonnie was already 21. He turned, I think, in the end of the summer.
Y'all were still kids.
We were kids. And so he had a gift that he could just mesmerize people, because he just kind of got inside your head right away. And any pain and suffering you had, Lonnie already experienced it. He already knew. And he was like, in those days, we were all lost and searching for a guru. And everybody had to have a guru. We had tried a bunch of things. I know in my life, I had been through so many gurus that I would forget some of their names. And so like Randy had said, I should go back to the Woodstock days, because that, even previous, before that, I was a typical lost kid, doing the hippie movement thing, not knowing who I was, or, where I was heading. And, we were all looking for truth. Today everyone says truth doesn't exist, and that's your truth, and that, postmodern, we're even beyond postmodernism. But in that day, there was one question everyone asked: is it true or isn't it? Because we were seeking truth. We were all honest seekers. It was like, greetings, pilgrim. When you found someone you could relate to, that was a very interesting experience. That was in the days when the hippie movement started, and when you met someone, they said, "Oh, what's your sign?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after I got saved, I had to take on a new persona. So when they say, "Hey, wow, man, like, what's your sign?" I'd go, "Presbyterian."
Yeah.
And I got that from Jim Kennedy. And so what happened was, I did go to Woodstock, And I was there early, and we helped build the stage there, and we kind of hung out with all the people. Thought that was really cool. We carried lumber around.
You were part of the production crew?
No, we just joined in and helped and thought we were cool.
Okay.
It was a few guys in a black 57 Chevy with a guy named Fat Benny driving. And my brother and the other guys, they ended up going water skiing in Lake George and missed the whole thing. And they said, oh, that was a 20-mile traffic jam. What was all that about? And we had actually made history.
Right,
and we didn't realize it, but while we were there, they were telling us history is being made, you know. And so that was a very surreal experience. No one there had ever experienced anything quite like that. We had 500,000 people with really no violence. And it was total anarchy, but it was a peaceful anarchy.
Yeah, that's an interesting perception there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we knew there was another dimension to life. We saw people mixing together that it was unimaginable. With hippies, with police officers, with soldiers from West Point, helicopters coming and bringing supplies, and the hog farmer hippie people from Taos, New Mexico with their custom-made granola, and they're feeding the masses. And then it rained, and we were all playing slip and slide in the mud, and people were skinny dipping in the lake. And I mean, it was really riding around on cows, and it was just crazy. The whole thing was just like a kaleidoscope of zany insanity. I mean, people were doing every drug under the sun, but there was no violence. And
that's
so this was incredible. So after Woodstock was over, we did this caravan thing, and we ended up down in old Key West, and, you know, traveling around in hippie vans, and, you know, and that was the culture then. So I was always, you know, moved by that, and it did change my life. So then, exactly 6 months later, I mean, like to the day, I was in Fort Lauderdale on the beach with I think there was four guys, you know, my roommates, and we were all down there. And there was a girl there, and she had this book with a leather thing on it. It was like a sacred book, and some guy was like yelling at her, and he was like this weird shaman kind of guy. So we're all watching this, and was kind of amused, you know, and he got really, you know, weird and scary. So I just got up and walked over there by him. And he didn't think much of me because he was twice my size. But then when he realized I was with 4 other guys, he took off, you know. And so the girl, she was like, oh, wow, you know, thank you. You guys, you know, got this guy away from me and all. So she gave me this little card, and it was an invitation to a pot party. And I'm like, wow. And I couldn't believe it. These people were so organized. They actually had a business card for a pie party. And the first thing that came to mind was that old TV show, Dobie Gillis and Maynard G. Krebs, the beatnik. They would have rent-raising parties. So I thought they must be raising rent for their party. So we're on our motorcycles and all. I said, well, I can't break with my friends. Can I bring them along too? She said, oh, sure. You all are welcome. I'll see you tonight, you know, and she leaves. So, you know, we said, this is really wild. You know, we went home, put on a little aftershave, you know, even though we all had long hair and beards. And, you know, we said, we're going to a pie party. And this is a really good one. And we figured there'd be a lot of good-looking girls there and all this stuff, you know. So we get there to this place. And we go in, and they had more food than I'd seen in one place. I mean, this was like going to a smorgasbord, you know. That's what we used to call
a regular church social.
All you can eat, yeah. Well, it turned out it wasn't a pot party. It was a potluck supper from Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Now, none of us knew what that was. We found out. So we went through there and we ate, and there was no pot. We ate a lot of food. Listen, there was a real mixture of people there, though. They were all nice. So as we were leaving, all the guys said, come on, let's blow this chicken coop. We're out of here, you know, you're all, you know, murmuring. So off we went. As I walked down the driveway, the prettiest girl that we knew from the beach pulled up in her little tan Volkswagen and got out and was walking up the driveway.
U-turn.
Now, none of us had talked to her at the beach because we were afraid of her, because her 2 big brothers were the 2 biggest lifeguards on the beach. And they didn't like hippies talking to their sister. So she walks up, of all the guys, she walks up to me. Now, I'm the runt of the litter with these guys, right? And they were all a little older, a little bigger, and a little smarter, and, you know, had fancier cars than me at the time. So she walks up to me, and she grabs my arm, and she says, I didn't know you came here. I always see you at the beach, and you never talk to me. You know, and I said, well, yeah, come once in a while. Yeah. So she grabs me by the arm, and she says, well, come on inside, and let's talk. And the guys are, oh, they're falling all over.
Yeah,
No, the goddess, the beach goddess with him, you know. No.
Right.
I at that point, I started thinking God did ordain this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it was entrapment.
And he sent her right along.
She brought me in there. I sat down in this very comfortable chair, and her and several ladies gathered around me. One was like 80 years old, and the other one was like, it was her 50th birthday. She was the lady that owned the house. It was Virginia Schmidt was her name. It was called the Greenhouse. It became very famous.
And where was that?
In Fort Lauderdale.
In Fort
and it was an outreach
Okay.
of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. I was one of the original kids in the book that he had wrote called The Evangelism Explosion, or EE. Became world famous afterwards. I was one of those original hippie kids they talked about in the book. Well, so they cared about me, and they asked me lots of questions, and what they wanted to know what I believed. So I told them everything I could imagine. I read the I Ching, and I listened to Abby Hoffman, and I got to do some acid with Timothy Leary, and I was at Woodstock, and I told them that I believed in about every weird thing there was.
Back up a second here, Ed. You actually met Timothy Leary?
Yeah, that's another side. That'll come up later.
Okay, right. We can't really divert too much on that, but you actually
I told them that,
time
yes.
with
Yes, I did.
Wow.
Yeah. Now,
That's amazing.
before all this, what I told them basically everything that I ever thought I believed. You know, it was just, I yoga. I remember my mom's neighbor was a yoga guy, and he taught me how to sit in the yoga position and stare at a candle and go, you know, I was about 12 then, or no, I was 10 then. So all these weird things that I had, and so I didn't really, you know, bottom line was I didn't know what I believed. I thought there had to be a God because Woodstock was so much fun. And so I didn't really know how to structure my thinking in that dimension at that point. I was lost in searching.
Like theologically.
Yeah. I needed a real guru. I was looking in all the wrong places. And I thought Leary was the coolest guru because I actually got to meet him. I'll tell that part when it comes up. But so I told all this stuff to these people, you know, and they were just kind of trying not to laugh. Their eyes were rolling, and they were like,
It kind of sound like the Beatles following everybody, anybody and everybody. Let's try it.
And the one lady, she asked me if the moon was made out of green cheese, you know. I mean, it was a fun time. So I said, you know, I just turned 21, or no, just turned 20. No, I just turned 20. And the one lady said, how do you know you're going to get to 21? And I said, well, most people do, don't they? And she said, didn't you come here on a motorcycle? And I said, yeah, I just bought that one. Isn't it cool? And she points to the other lady, and she says, her son died on his motorcycle last year, and he was only 18. And I went, gulp.
Yeah.
And then they said, where are you going to go when you die? And I said, well, you know, I mean, really, I might die when I'm 80 or 90. I'm not worried about that now. I just turned 20. I want to have fun. So they said, well, you need to have your eternity secured before you do anything, because if you were to die tonight, what would you tell God if he asked you, why should I let you into my heaven? And I'm thinking, heaven, there might be a heaven because there's probably a hell because there's creepy people around and there is evil and, you know, Charles Manson and crazy stuff going on, Vietnam War and all this stuff. So they had me cornered, basically. I couldn't argue my way out.
Is this in Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, in Fort Lauderdale, okay. We're at the Greenhouse. So what ended up happening was I tried to get out of there because, you know, I mean, my friends were already gone and all. So all of a sudden, I'm about ready to get up, and the doorbell rings, and in comes this guy, this very distinguished-looking man in a dark suit with a tie. We were afraid of people like that in those days.
And they were mostly afraid afraid of y'all too?
Yeah, I had long hair and a beard. I was kind of freaky looking at the time.
Show them that you can show the picture.
Well, yeah, I'll do that. And so then he comes in and he sits on the arm of the chair and he leans on me. I couldn't move. He was an old judo guy, and he just had his arm right there, And the lady said, "Dr. Kennedy, this young man here was just about to pray with us and ask Jesus into his heart." And I'm looking around the room. Who is she referring to? And so all of a sudden I'm praying with D. James Kennedy, the distinguished Dr. D. James Kennedy, who I'd never heard of. And he was a young guy then. He only had 300 people in his little church. And it was before they built the new building at Coral Ridge. And so I prayed this little prayer with him, "Dear Lord, basically forgive me. I admit I'm a sinner." And just like we used to call the sinner's prayer. And I just repeated after him by rote. There was no heart in this or anything. But something magic happened. I had a miraculous conversion. When I opened my eyes, everything was different.
Praise Jesus.
It was a new world. Wow. And all the weird things I thought in my head and things I was looking for, it was all there.
A new creation.
Yeah.
Wow. There you were.
Yeah, this was like a miraculous conversion.
Jesus does it. It's amazing. Before Jesus and then after Jesus, I can't even describe the difference in the improvement in everything.
Yeah.
It was a new world.
Interruption.
New world, new eyes,
So
new
wow,
ears.
was that quick for you?
Yeah, instantaneous. Wow. They gave me a pile of stuff. And I'm on a motorcycle, and I had to tie this stuff on there. They gave me a pile of stuff to read. I got back to where we were living, and all the guys were like, "What happened to you? Like, whoa, did you take off with that girl and all this?" And I'm like, "No." I couldn't tell them anything. They think I was nuts. So finally, they saw the stuff I had. I read the whole book of John that night, and all the tracts, everything they gave me, I read it all. I always remember the one about this is your life, and when you die, God's going to play a movie of your life back. And I'm like, oh God.
Right, none of us are going to really like that
scary.
movie. Like, oh boy, can we get to the good part, Lord? It's like maybe there isn't one.
Yeah, exactly. So the word was that Acid Eddie had a bad trip. Because that was it. There were things going on then, and I remember around that time, Art Linkletter's daughter jumped out of a window, committed suicide with acid and all that stuff, and I had gotten into that a bit with. It was not an illegal street drug at the time. We had a vial of LSD from Sandoz Labs, and we got it from one of the girls that was with Timothy Leary. Now I can tell that part where I went. This was after Woodstock, but before I got saved. It was November 15th, and there was a big peace march in Washington, and we went to it, and it was, at that time, it was the biggest in history. It was a freezing cold day, and I had this 8-foot Navajo Indian blanket that was my famous blanket, and we had a whole bunch of people using this blanket to stay warm. It was wool, and it was really, really warm. And so we came around the base of the Washington Monument, and there was a guy and 2 women, and they crashed right into our blanket. So we just kind of wrapped the blanket around them. We were all laughing, and it was Timothy Leary.
Wow.
And one of the women was named Susan. I remember that. One of them was Susan. And
in Washington.
Right at the base of the Washington Monument. Freezing cold. The wind chill was like in the teens. It was wicked cold. So we all huddled to the blanket, and then we all found this little place to get warm. And I remember Dr. Spock was speaking. Dr. Spock.
The baby doctor.
Yes, the baby doctor. He was one of the speakers. He was speaking at that point. So we had exchanged numbers and things, there's a whole saga after that.
Let me ask you, did you ever experience any of the Jesus Revolution that was in Los Angeles, in California, or was
That's where we're going. No, that's where we're going. So it started in Fort Lauderdale. Correct. And now
So
I want
I
to give you
guess they
the
said,
Cliff
"Go
Notes
west,
version.
young man."
Yes, go west. Horace Greeley said, "Go
You
west."
know what,
Man, go west.
Ed? I want to tell the audience, in the Jesus Revolution book, the author actually interviewed you,
Yeah.
and you're quoted in there.
Oh yeah.
I'm hoping we can get to that.
The Jesus Revolution. That's Michael McFadden's book.
Yeah, Lord, well, I missed the station break.
Yeah.
It's already past 7:30.
Sorry, Shelley.
There's that one. And then there's this guy here.
That's Ed,
That's
is
me.
a young man.
I was the
Ed
cover boy
Weyman,
of
at
Lutheran
21
Standard.
years old.
Yep, Lutheran Standard magazine. This was 1971.
Put it in front of this camera. There
And
you
this
go.
camera.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
two cameras.
Two
Yeah.
cameras. I
Yep.
can only see
Yep.
one there.
That's
Facebook
Ed as a
pages.
21-year-old
There. See that?
seeker.
That hair is all
And you're looking
gone.
at that,
Gone with the wind.
that lovely picture on WAPN 91.5 FM radio, just so you know.
Okay.
Now, let's speed this up a little bit here. The Cliff Notes version. So, in Fort
So
Lauderdale.
you get saved in Fort
Yes,
Lauderdale.
yes. Now,
Praise
what
Jesus.
happened after that was this girl and the girl I met on the beach were best friends. So the two of them would come and get me. We didn't have telephones in those days. We didn't even have a landline. They would just come and knock on the door weeknights in their fancy little convertible with the top down, and they would take me to these things called Bible studies. They were
Okay.
beautiful, wealthy
Yeah.
houses on the water in Fort Lauderdale. One was in a little coffee house, a Christian coffee house. There was always something like, 3, 4, 5 nights a week sometimes we'd go to these little excursions. And I would sit there just amazed and listening to these people and, meeting all kinds of people and getting questions answered. So one by one, my roommates started coming along. Out of the 4, there were 4, 3 got saved through that. One we disappeared and we never know what happened to him to this day. But the other 3 got saved, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, later on, when I came back from California, our other new roommate was Neil Ganzel, who was a pastor up at Coquina Presbyterian in Ormond. And he and Dave Amato and I we were roommates originally. Dave was one of the original ones. All my roommates became famous but me.
Well, and
Oh, yeah.
let me
But
take
you're-
this
you're
moment
on-
just to let the audience know that once again, we are with our good friend, Mr. Ed Weyman, who is reminiscing about some of his experiences in the Jesus Revolution. Just wanted to make sure that we reminded everybody who we're speaking with.
All right.
And thank you again for being here with us, Ed. And pardon that interruption that you were.
I'm not done yet, so you might not be thanking me.
Come on. Come on.
Well, here's what happened. Now, this just shows how God operates. Okay, I met a girl named Lois Jordan. She's a beautiful girl. She was older woman, 24. She was a school teacher, an English teacher in Pompano.
Almost cougar.
She said, I met her at Bible study, and so I got to know her pretty well. We went to church together and all. And she said, "There's a guy speaking at my school that's incredible, and he's going to speak at the coffee house tonight, and I'm going to come pick you up and bring you there." Well, it was some famous guy. He was from Stanford Research Institute, Dr. Lambert Dolphin, and the mayor of Fort Lauderdale had given him the key to the city.
Wow.
Okay? And the Gore family, this is really good. The Gore family owned the Fort Lauderdale News at the time, and he was staying at their house.
As in Al
So-
Gore?
Yeah, as in the first cousin.
Small
Okay,
world,
so yeah,
huh?
so she brings me to hear this guy speak. So after he gets done speaking, I go up there and I start talking to him, and I asked him some questions, and he goes, "You are not a normal young man." He says, "Where did you come up with these questions?" And I said, "Well, I just got saved a couple of months ago." He goes, "A couple of months ago?" He said, "What are you doing with your life? What's God doing with you?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to Bible studies and coffee houses, and I really don't know what I'm doing." And I said, I want to learn more, and I want to, go. He says, "All right, well, let's just do this. Sell everything you have and meet up with me the day after tomorrow, and we'll fly out there, and you can stay at my house, and I'll hook you up with the Christian World Liberation Front people, with Jack Sparks and Pat Matriciana and all those people." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, okay." And I did it.
Wow.
I had a car, a motorcycle. I'd sell everything. And I got on the plane with him. And he says, "All right, well, let's just do this. Sell everything you have and meet up with me the day after tomorrow, and we'll fly out there, and you can stay at my house, and I'll hook you up with the Christian World Liberation Front people, with Jack Sparks and Pat Matriciana and all those people." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, okay." And I did it. I got on the plane with him. You cannot make this up.
Amazing.
To this day, he and I talk almost daily. Still, that's over 50 years. He's Uncle Lambo. He adopted me, and he became my uncle, my real uncle, and
That's impressive.
he was even my legal guardian for a while. Actually, we had a
Well,
contract.
I can tell you, Ed, you know what? The quotes in the book from a 20-something-year-old man that I read, you didn't
Well, I'll
sound
run
like
through those
a
real
normal,
quick then. Yeah, I'll show you.
You didn't sound like a normal
So
21-year-old.
this is the crazy funny part. We get there, and it's a long flight. We're at San Francisco Airport. So this couple picked us up, Phil and Tinny Compton. And Phil became a famous Episcopal priest later on, Father Phil Compton, and wrote books, and only died of cancer a few years ago. And Tinny was a mathematician. They were really cool people. So they took us to the house. The house was an adobe place on the side of a mountain. It just sold recently for $7 million, okay, in Palo Alto,
So that's
okay. We had movie stars for neighbors, and we overlooked Stanford and the whole deal. So that was the beginning of a long odyssey and a journey. I ended up going off on a retreat. I found out what a retreat was. They sent me to this place. It was called Mount Hermon. And so I ended up rooming with this guy and his wife and two little kids. His name was Luis Palau. You might have heard that
Luis
name before.
Palau, yes.
Okay? Well, Uncle Lambo was sharing his office at Overseas Crusades at the time with Luis. Okay? So this is all in one day now. So I meet them. I don't know who they are. He was nobody then. They're just nice people taking me in. Good. So this guy, who was kind of pushy, he said he'd gotten introduced to me, and he was kind of pushy. And he goes, "Well, listen, there's a guy not coming here. He's running late, so you need to go out and give your testimony." So I start walking out on the stage naively. I'm looking at this big, huge crowd. I'd never seen a crowd that big, and I'd never spoken in a group before. So and so I got halfway out to the microphone, and I turned around, and I said, "What's a testimony?" And it was loud enough so the people in the front rows heard it.
Yeah.
And the audience went hysterical. Okay?
Well, we
so
really got a newbie.
he said, "Just tell them how you got saved."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew how to do
Yeah,
that.
okay.
By the way, the guy's name was Chuck Swindoll.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
Yeah, young guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Chuck Swindoll?
So this was at Mount Hermon, above Santa Cruz in the mountains. So I give my little testimony at the time. It was only 4 months old. And the audience they were just hysterical with laughter. It was so funny. I was their token hippie. I had long hair and a beard, So I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to do it. I just started rambling like I still do. And so they're yelling, "Psst, psst, the guy's here." And I didn't know what to do, so I just kept talking. So all of a sudden, he comes out, he puts his arm around me. I thought he was going to put me in a headlock. And he goes, "It's time to pray." He prays and yanks me off the stage, shows me behind the curtain, and he says, "Thank you."
Here, right.
It was hilarious. And so, I mean, the things that happened, I knew God's hand was on me all the time. I went back, spent a couple of nights in the cabin. It was a very small cabin with the two little kids and Luis and his wife and all. So then I had to get back to Lambert's, and there was no one to give me a ride. So in those days, we just hitchhiked. So you cannot make this up. I had never been to this area in my life, Santa Cruz Mountains. And so I stuck my thumb out, and a little while went by, and this van pulled over. And they said, "Come on, get in." So I'm in there, and there were like a couple of guys and a couple of girls in there.
Nowadays, you'd be scared to get in a van.
Yeah, in those days, we hitchhiked everywhere. Right. So the one girl says to me, "How come you're so tan?" So I said, "I just moved here from Florida." She goes, "Oh, my sister lives in Florida." So I said, "Oh," "Well, I came from Fort Lauderdale." And she goes, "Well, my sister lives in Fort Lauderdale." Her sister turned out to be my next door neighbor, who one of my roommates had dated. You cannot make this up in 1,000 years. So I started telling her about, got there. She goes, "Oh, you're the Jesus freak guy." So I knew God's hand was on me all the time. This is 3,000 miles away, a place I'd never been, and this happened to me.
Yeah.
They drove me right to Lambert's door. So you cannot make this stuff up.
You met Chuck Swindoll
Yeah, briefly, and I never liked him. Now he's a great guy. I still listen to him on the radio. But
You met Chuck Smith.
Well, they all
You
did.
met Lonnie.
They all did this to us. We were their token hippies. We had long hair and a beard, and we could speak a little. So hey, get out there and show. You know, this. We were exploited.
God can save even you.
Yeah, right. Well, that was it.
You
So
were their extreme example,
then
maybe.
they sent me on a retreat again to Yosemite. I woke up and there was El Capitan. And that's where I, hooked up with Jack Sparks and Christian World Liberation, friend of Pat Matriciana. He was the head of Jeremiah Films and all that. So I got in with those guys. And so one of the kids fell off the mountain and died with us that day. And they had a funeral up there. This was wild. And then bears came during the night. And I knew God was really in charge. It was like Mother's Day, I think it was. Yeah, the day when he fell off the mountain.
So from the Washington Monument, from Woodstock,
oh yeah, everything.
From Yosemite and El Capitan to LA.
I could spend 5 days. 5 days to tell the deals, but so I just want to try and hit the highlights. So while I'm living at Lambert's, all these people would come from everywhere. So one time I came back from a weekend retreat thing, and there was some guy sleeping in my bed snoring, and so I woke him up, and he had my room there. And he reached his hand out and he shook my hand. He was real strong, and his name was Hal. So he said, Hal. So he said, oh, Lambert told me I could have your room. You're on a camping trip, a retreat. So I said, well, we got rained out. He said, well, just roll your sleeping bag out there and sleep on the floor. So I did, of course. So the next morning at breakfast, they were talking about end time stuff, eschatology. And I had just read parts of a book that Lambert had on his desk. I said, wait a minute. So they started arguing with me and disagreeing with me. So I was, no, I read it in a book. I'm going to get this. So I went down and I dug out the book off of his roll-top desk. And as I was walking up, I saw the picture on the back, and it was that guy, Hal, that was sitting at our breakfast table with everybody eating. And so I slammed it on the thing, and I said, you guys tricked me. And they all busted out laughing.
Yeah.
That was Hal Lindsey. That was my first met Hal. So he would come up
here.
So
Hal Lindsey was sleeping in your bed.
Yeah.
That got that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
we had,
it was
called,
it was
called the bunkhouse. We had triple-decker bunk beds in part of a bunkhouse room, and we always had guests constantly coming and going.
I believe his book, The Late
Great Planet Earth, was the first big book.
Was the greatest selling book of
the decade of the 70s.
Right, not just the year, of the decade.
The decade, nonfiction, yes.
Right.
Yes, it was. He wrote a lot of other books too. Okay, so what ended up happening was Hal talked me into going down to L.A. I hitchhiked down to L.A. and these people picked me up in a van. So while we're riding along around Big Sur,
picked up in a lot of vans.
We see a guy with a little puppy and a guitar case hitchhiking. So I said, well, pick this guy up. And the girl said, pick him up, the puppy. And the guy said no, and he drove like a mile down. We yelled at him and we forced him to go back and pick this guy up. You cannot make this up. He gets in, they light up a joint and pass it around, and when it came to me, I said, no thanks, I'm a Christian. And everybody was like shocked, like, what did we pick up here? What's going on? The guy's name was Vern. You'll find out in a minute. Vern Bullock. He became the most famous Christian singer. He was Hal Lindsey's opening act on his world tour. Well, Vern was a homeless hippie at the time who had just gotten out of a drug rehab center. And I didn't know that he had already done a world tour entertaining troops with Bob Hope. And he was a phenomenal guitar-playing singer. Well, so he and I, we ended up getting dumped down in L.A. We ended up sleeping under cars in a used car lot and attacked by guard dogs. And we were stuck under there all night because it rained on us. And then some weird guy picked us up and was threatening to kill us or kidnap us. And, and then we talked him into letting us out of the car, or I was going to kill him while he was driving. This was crazy. He was one of these weird sickos. This was our introduction to downtown L.A. Right? So I brought Vern, went to Don Williams' house. Don was the youth pastor at Hollywood Presbyterian. And I also knew him from the house. He used to come up too. So we went to Don. So I brought Vern in, and I said, well, can this guy crash here tonight? And Don said, is he a Christian? I said, no, he's all messed up. So Don sat down with him, and then we all kind of listened at a distance in the living room, and then they prayed. And Vern accepted the Lord. Wow. So that night we went to the Salt Company, which there is a movie out about, The Miracle in Hollywood, the Salt Company Coffee House. Well, see that movie because Vern does the song that opens the movie. It shows him right there. So we go to the Salt Company Coffee House that night, and one of the acts didn't show up. So I said, "Can he play?" And he said, "No, he can't play." Well, finally we talked him into letting Vern play. Well, Vern brought the house down. Bob Munger of Capitol Records was in the audience. He signed Vern up for an $85,000 contract. Homeless Vern just had enough money to retire on. This was 1971. Wow. In fact, January of 1971. Wow. So Vern and I became roommates with Dave Anderson, other buddy, David Anderson, the famous one. I've heard him on Dobson and seen him on 700 Club. We're still in touch. We were all roommates for 50 years. So all this stuff went on. It was just a whirlwind. So this old girlfriend I had, Pam Alquist, she ended up marrying Larry Norman, which is another long saga in itself, but she was like sort of my girlfriend at the time. So she says, "Come on, let's go down to the Calvary Chapel place. I want to hear this kid Lonnie, the Lonnie Frisbee, the kid, the whiz kid kind of thing." So down we went to Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa. Filled up the car full of kids.
Cool. So that's the actual church that he's preaching at.
Yeah. And so it became a ritual. We went regularly, and we got to know Lonnie. And then Chuck baptized me in the ice cold water. And Lonnie was like there. Lonnie's like real little and skinny. And I think like a wave was like going to sweep him away. And I could stand in the deeper water than Lonnie could. The guy in the movie that played Lonnie was kind of beefy looking. Lonnie was like really skinny.
Yeah. Same thing with me. I got dunked in the Atlantic.
Yeah, well, this was cold. This was a punish assignment getting baptized in the Pacific like that.
Yeah, I believe it.
So we hung out there a lot. I got to know Lonnie, and then I got to know Chucky and Tommy and the guys in the Love Song band. So Dave Anderson, he was the head of Lutheran Youth Alive then, and he had these Lutheran Youth Congresses all over the country. So on the Thanksgiving weekend, the following Thanksgiving weekend, he rented out the entire San Francisco Hilton. Wow. Okay? Me, Vern, Dave, Leaf, and another guy, we crashed in sleeping bags in the Imperial Suite of the San Francisco Hilton with JFK, Bob Dylan, and a whole bunch of other people on the golden plaque in the room. And here we were on the couches with sleeping bags.
Now, where was that?
At San Francisco Hilton.
Okay.
We rented the entire hotel out. And they gave us that because they had nowhere to put us, because Dave was the guy who did all this. Hal Lindsey was one of the speakers, and the Love Song came, played. I mean, this was a big hoopla. This had all the top people in the country at the time, Christian speakers. So then I said, you know what, let's do this. Let's bring the Love Song guys over to the house. So I brought them over to Uncle Lambo's, and they set up full electric in the living room. And we opened up the doors, and we had an amphitheater behind the house and a 5-acre almond orchard. So we had over 500 kids in there because somebody put it on the radio. Yeah. And so this was wild. They played full electric. Wow. And so neighbors called the police. The police came, and they stopped. And the police said, "We didn't tell you to stop." All the cops sat there until they got done playing completely. Then they said, "We've been sent here to shut this down. This is unauthorized." And it was unbelievable.
That's neat.
And it was one of the highlights of my life, having a Love Song concert in the living room with 500 kids in the backyard. And they were in the almond. We had an almond orchard. And the kids were in the trees and had blankets out on the ground. It was just incredible. So all these memories. There's so much more. But this is just kind of the highlights of it all.
That's great.
And I have to add this. Yeah. In the movie, when Lonnie said, "I'm leaving, I'm going to Florida," okay, well, I freaked out because I came back to Florida first. And I was living in Fort Lauderdale, and I used to run on the beach every day. So I'm running down the beach one day, and I had cut off my hair and beard and gotten a job at the Christian radio station at WWOG 99.9 FM in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. It was my Bible town there, with a guy named Homer Akers, And so I'm running down the beach, and there's Lonnie walking on the beach. So I snatched a paperback book out of his back pocket that he was carrying, and he jumped. He goes, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And then when I talked, he realized who I was. So he said, "Come on, man, I can bring you over. I'm crashing this really cool house over here in Harbor Beach." It was walking distance from my house. So it was a guy named Bob Mumford, and it was his house. And then this other red-haired guy was there named Derek Prince. So these guys are there, and they're going to start this new church thing. And these other guys came in, and I'm just sitting there listening. And everything, this vineyard thing they were going to do. So I went and told Jim Kennedy about it. He said, stay away from that. He said, they're not Presbyterians like us, And so, they had all their little doctrinal, oxes that they didn't want gourd or something. But so I did hang out with them a little bit, but I never got involved much in it because the charismatic thing was cool and it was a big part of the Jesus movement. But when it turned into charismaniac, when people were rolling and yelling and screaming in the churches, and they had just weird stuff. And when John Wimber came and all, he made the thing grow big. But then it got just too weird for, like, Presbyterians are like the frozen chosen, and the charismaniacs were like the opposite end of the spectrum. They were like doing holy laughter, rolling in the aisles, and so it got really kind of polarized. And so I like to stay friends. I like Switzerland, stay friends with everybody, so I did. But then Lonnie went traveling. He was gone all over the world, and he became this big celebrity thing. And I'd read about him.
You actually hooked up with Lonnie when he was in L.A.
Yeah, I knew him from Costa Mesa.
And then you ran into him
and then in Fort Lauderdale again. Wow. Yeah, God always had his hand in this. And it was the first day Lonnie got there, first walk on the beach that he took. And I almost knocked him down. I was running down the beach, and he was walking in front of me, and and it was like I almost bumped him, And I looked at him, this is Lonnie. I can't believe it's Lonnie. He had no idea who I was.
Right, because you look so different.
I had no hair and beard, but when I talked, he said that gave me away.
Yeah.
So that's all I know. Now I know more, but
and then
this
from
is
the Washington Monument to Woodstock,
all
into
that.
Hal Lindsey in your bed.
And God gave me a lot of experiences and a lot of names to drop around in weird places.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing of all in my life was Vern Bullock, because Vern became a famous evangelist, and he would tell his story every time he spoke anywhere in the world, and he was a singing evangelist. And he would talk about the hippie kid who picked him up, and what made him get saved was this kid looked over, and this was Acapulco gold, the finest stuff, and he said, no thanks, I'm a Christian. And that was what got Vern saved. And so God used me in a small way to get Vern saved, but it went global, like you would say today, viral, because Vern became a major big force,
in the
him, being Hal Lindsey's lead out man, and they would go on world tours everywhere, and Dave too, Dave Anderson. Dave would go.
I'm tempted to
evangelize in the world.
Have you back for another show. You know what? I do. Speaking of tunes, what I would like to do is we kind of need to wrap things up, and what I'd like to do is I want to play one more song before we head out for the week, and I want to remind everybody. Join us next week, 7 to 7:30. We had a special hour show this evening because of our friend Ed Weyman. And special thanks to Shelley and WAPN for her generous offer to allow us to have the extra time tonight. Thank you very much, Shelley. It's truly a blessing. You've been a blessing to us since before we even met you, and we are grateful. And Ed Weyman, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It has been fun. It is my pleasure. I'm honored to be able to do this. And you guys, from those home Bible studies and all that we experienced and went through, and all the, we get, 20, 30, 40 people there at a time, but we had over 1,000 people through the years that had come, because this is a very transient area, and people would come. We had a lot of Palmer students and Riddle students and just people from every walk of life at our home Bible study. And people say, well, how did you, get to have a home Bible study in your house? I said, well, Hal Lindsey used to do it in our living room when I was at Renewal House, when I worked there for that year. We would get these famous pastors. They weren't famous then to us. They were just people.
Back then, they were young kids.
I learned how to run a home Bible study. And I've had plenty of pastors tell me that's my gift, is to run a home Bible study like that, because I'm not smart enough to dominate it theologically, but I can draw other people out. And that's what
And it was a blessing to dozens and dozens of folks, and including us. Monique and I are grateful, and Loving Kindness kind of got a genesis there. And it was Jeff and Trinity that kind of got it kicked off. But we are going to say thank you to everybody that joined us in this evening on Facebook. William and Emil and Corky and Emily and Deborah, Michael Johnson. All of you guys, y'all are a blessing.